The flashing red and blue lights hit my half-built cabin like a crime scene. 3 squad cars pulled up, sirens blaring through what had been a quiet morning. I set down my hammer, heart pounding in disbelief, as officers stepped out, hands resting on their holsters. Behind them, strutting like she'd just busted a cartel, was none other than Brenda Harrington, president of the Maplewood Estates HOA. "That's him!" she screeched, jabbing a manicured finger toward me. "That's the squatter who's illegally building on protected HOA land." The lead officer, tall with silver at his temples, approached carefully. "Sir," he said, voice steady but cautious, "I'll need to see some ID and any permits you've got for this construction." I slowly reached into my back pocket, pulling out my wallet and a folder I'd started carrying everywhere, because of Brenda. "Officer Davidson," I said, glancing at his name tag, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is my property." Brenda stomped forward, face red and furious. "Don't listen to him. This entire lakefront is part of the Maplewood Estates community. I have documentation." Officer Davidson lifted a hand to quiet her and started flipping through my papers. One by one, his eyebrows climbed. Deed, property survey, water rights dated all the way back to 1922. His expression shifted from suspicion to mild amusement. "Ma'am," he said finally, turning to Brenda with a tone that made her flinch, "according to these records, this gentleman owns not just this parcel, but the entire riverfront from mile marker 7 to mile marker 12. That includes every bit of water access." Her jaw dropped. But this circus hadn't started today. It began 3 months ago, the day I broke ground on the land my grandfather left me. 20 acres of untouched lakefront paradise he'd bought back in the 1950s. My property bordered Maplewood Estates, a gated neighborhood that had popped up in the 1990s, but it was never, and I mean never, part of their HOA. I'd spent years dreaming about this place. A cabin with solar panels for off-grid living, a wraparound deck overlooking the water, a little dock for the fishing boat I'd bought last summer. After 2 decades behind a desk as a software engineer, I was ready for something real. Weekends with the sound of wind through the trees instead of traffic through concrete canyons. The trouble began on day 2 of construction. I was marking out the foundation when a golf cart came barreling down the dirt path, kicking up a storm of dust. Brenda Harrington emerged like Schuer invading Normandy. "Excuse me?" she barked, arms crossed like a prison warden. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I straightened up, wiped the sweat off my forehead, and said evenly, "Building a cabin. Can I help you?" "This is HOA property," she snapped. "You can't just start construction without board approval." "This isn't HOA property," I replied, already feeling my patience fray. "This land belongs to me." She actually laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed off the trees. "All lakefront access in this area is under Maplewood Estates jurisdiction. I don't know what scam you're trying to run, but I'm shutting this down right now." That was the start of what turned into a 3-month campaign of harassment. Every morning, I'd show up to find new notices taped to my equipment. "Cease. Unauthorized construction." Half of them printed from Word templates that weren't even official. I'd tossed them straight into the burn pile. Then came the trespassing. My trail cameras caught her sneaking onto my property at all hours. Snapping photos, taking measurements, pretending she was some kind of private investigator from a bad reality show. One morning, I caught her inside the foundation I'd just poured, clipboard in hand. "Brenda!" I called, startling her so badly she almost dropped her pen. "You're trespassing again." She spun around, holding her clipboard like a shield. "I'm documenting HOA violations. The noise from your construction is disturbing our residents' peace and tranquility." "The nearest house is half a mile away," I said, trying not to laugh. "And it's 10 in the morning, on a Tuesday." Her lips tightened. "We'll see what our lawyers have to say about that." The lawyers never showed up, but her antics escalated. She started bringing backup. Other board members who'd stand at what they thought was the property line, taking photos and muttering like a pack of gossiping raccoons. One day, she brought a man she introduced as the HOA's environmental compliance officer, which I'm pretty sure was just her nephew wearing a polo shirt and an attitude. The breaking point came when I arrived one morning and saw new signs. Hammered into the ground, private property, Maplewood Estates HOA. She'd actually claimed my land as theirs. That's when I decided to keep my documents on me at all times. So when she showed up again that afternoon, I was ready. Those signs need to come down, I told her firmly. Make me, she shot back with a smirk. I've called the real authorities this time. And that's how I ended up surrounded by flashing lights, accused of squatting on my own land. The police are on their way to remove you from our property, Brenda had shouted that morning, which led us straight to this moment. 3 squad cars, flashing lights, and Officer Davidson calmly reviewing my paperwork while Brenda's face cycled through every shade of purple known to mankind. This can't be right, she sputtered. The HOA owns all water access. We've been using that beach for 20 years. Officer Davidson's expression didn't budge. Using it and owning it are 2 different things, ma'am, he said evenly. According to these records, it looks like your HOA has actually been trespassing on this gentleman's property for the past 2 decades. I spread the survey map across the hood of the cruiser, pointing out the lines with a finger. My grandfather owned everything from here. I traced the northern boundary to here. That includes the beach your residents use, the hiking trail, and even the boat launch. Brenda's jaw opened and closed like a startled fish, her clipboard trembling in her hands. The other officers gathered around, trying and failing to hide their smirks. One of them muttered something about another one of those HOA presidents, and the rest nodded knowingly. But we maintain that beach, Brenda protested desperately. We pay for sand deliveries and upkeep every summer. On my property, I said calmly. Without permission. That's called vandalism, technically speaking. Officer Davidson handed back my documents. Sir, do you want to press trespassing charges? Sounds like this has been going on for a while. I pretended to think it over while Brenda's face drained from purple to ghost white. Not this time, officer, I said finally. But I'll be putting up official boundary markers and no trespassing signs. Anyone crossing them after today will be prosecuted. You can't do this, Brenda shrieked. The whole community uses that beach. Our property values depend on lake access. I shrugged. Should have thought of that before you tried to steal my land. The officers gave her a stern warning about filing false police reports before driving off. Brenda just stood there, clutching her clipboard, watching her little empire crumble like stale coffee cake. By that evening, word spread through Maplewood Estates faster than wildfire in August. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Board members, neighbors, residents. Everyone wanted to talk about the lake access situation. The story got wilder with every retelling. By the time it reached the far end of the subdivision, people were saying I owned half the county and was planning to build a casino. The next morning, 15 people were waiting at my construction site. Thankfully, not with pitchforks, but with nervous smiles and anxious energy. A man in khakis and a tucked-in golf shirt stepped forward, hand extended. Mr. Peterson, he said politely, I'm Jack Sullivan, Vice President of the HOA Board. We'd like to discuss the lake access issue. Nothing to discuss, I replied, not even pausing from my work. It's my land. Has been since 1952. Jack nodded, then shot a glare over his shoulder at Brenda, who stood in the back looking like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. We understand that now, he said carefully. We're hoping to come to some kind of arrangement. The community has been using that beach for decades, and I've been paying taxes on it for decades, I countered. Funny how no one mentioned that when they were dumping sand on my beach. A woman in yoga pants spoke up, guilt all over her face. We didn't know. Brenda told us the HOA owned everything down to the water line. More glares. Brenda seemed to shrink where she stood, all that bluster gone. Jack cleared his throat. We'll be holding an emergency board meeting tonight. The residents deserve to know exactly what property we actually control. Brenda, I think you should prepare a full report explaining how this misunderstanding occurred. That meeting, from what I later heard, was pure chaos. My nearest neighbor, Tom, a good guy who lived right on the border of Maplewood Estates, Gave me the play-by-play the next day. "You should have seen it," he said, leaning over the fence. People were furious. They demanded to know how Brenda could have gotten something this big so wrong. Turns out she never even looked at the property records. She just assumed the HOA owned it because they maintained it. He chuckled, shaking his head. First time I've ever seen people yell at a board meeting, other than Brenda herself. She tried blaming everyone, the previous board, the county, and even you for not correcting her sooner. But nobody was buying it. The vote of no confidence was unanimous, minus hers, of course. She was removed as president on the spot. Jack's running things now. I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I started putting up my fence. Nothing aggressive, just a clean split rail design marking the boundary. My lawyer had advised adding proper private property, no trespassing signs too. So I did. That's when Brenda made her final mistake. At 2 in the morning, my trail camera caught her trying to yank out my fence posts using her Mercedes. The bumper got tangled in the wire, and she ended up dragging 50 feet of fencing before her car nosedived into a ditch. This time, I pressed charges, destruction of property, trespassing, and vandalism. The judge was not amused. In court, Brenda looked small, stripped of her authority and arrogance. The footage from my cameras played on a big screen for everyone to see. "Mrs. Harrington," the judge said, peering over his glasses, "you've demonstrated a disturbing pattern of harassment and criminal behavior. Quite shocking for someone in a position of community leadership, or former leadership, I should say." The verdict hit her like a truck, $12,000 in fines, plus restitution for the damage to my fence, 200 hours of community service, and a restraining order keeping her 500 feet away from my property. Her face was a portrait of disbelief. $12,000, she gasped. "But I was protecting our community." The judge slammed his gavel with finality. "You weren't protecting your community, Mrs. Harrington. You were protecting your ego. Consider yourself lucky I'm not adding jail time." The courtroom went silent except for the sound of that gavel echoing one last time, and just like that, the Queen of Maplewood Estates fell from her throne. All because she couldn't stand the idea that someone else owned the view she thought was hers.